I'm Johnny Lewis. I want to thank you for watching my video. I'm actually on vacation right now with my family. I'm in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Leave for New Orleans tomorrow. Then we head to the beach, and then we're going to Disney World. So that's why I have this fantastic hotel bed backdrop thing going on. A bit about me. I am the spouse of my wife, Monica. I'm the father of two kids. We live in Shawnee, Kansas, in the suburbs of Kansas City. My hobbies and interests, I'm a big sports fan. I'm a huge fan of the Tennessee Volunteers college team, even though they break my heart regularly. Big fan of the Chiefs, sporting Kansas City, season ticket holder, Fish, Grateful Dead, jam bands. Big fan of reading Neil deGrasse Tyson and trying to understand science more. It's kind of something I picked up late in life, even though I understand maybe a tenth of what I read. I'm a baby vegan. I've been vegan for about 4 months, and it's something that I've really come to enjoy, and that's kind of expanded my palate and my understanding of the world. I think the most important thing to know about me as an educator is what my why is. And for me, as an educator and also in my career experience in the nonprofit world, I've always just been passionate about helping institutions make any systemic changes they need to make to become more safe and equitable and effective for all people. And that includes people that sometimes are left behind. So people with disabilities, women, LGBTQIA plus folks, minorities, anybody that kind of the system uh, is kind of set up to overlook or to not provide equity to. I want to do all I can to help places become equitable for all folks. I currently lead a team of adults that work with high school students who have emotional or behavioral needs that, or maybe some past traumas that can make school uncomfortable. Professionally, I have 8 years of experience in secondary special education. I've done collaborative teaching. I've done center-based behavior programs. That's what I've spent most of my time doing. That includes a lot of para-educator, staff management. And then I also spent 9 years in nonprofit management, fundraising, budgeting, staffing, facility management, those sorts of things. Educationally, I have a master's in special education. I am wrapping up my building administration licensure. I also have, from my time in nonprofit life, I have a master's of divinity with an area in clinical counseling, and I have a doctorate in theology. And my dissertation study was on the sustainability and inclusivity and community partnerships for nonprofits in the 21st century. So things that I'm passionate about um, in that study as well. Module 1 was about our various forms of communication, and in particular, introducing ourselves. My most frequent forms of professional communication, in the order that I use them. First of all, number one, orally. I speak with students and paras every day in my classroom. The second most used form of communication is email. I email staff, I email students. I email my parents a lot as a special educator and with students who have a lot of needs. I partner with parents constantly to kind of figure out how we can support students in getting their work done or figuring out what's going on in their home life that can be affecting school. So I'm in contact with my parents most every day in some form or another. Text messaging, I text paras, I text school staff. It's just a way. I have students who have emergencies during the school day, and that's kind of a way for us to keep up with each other. We also use walkie-talkies, but we tend to use texting a little bit more now. I do a lot of in-person dialogue with colleagues. If there's an issue with a student, an email isn't clear, then I just go have a face-to-face conversation. I use a class Canvas page that's required by my district. That's where my lesson plans are all housed, and all my forms of communication are housed so that parents and students can get in touch with me and so that parents know what's going on in my classroom. I use text messaging with parents. I want to talk a little bit more about that in a second, but I've found that parents are very responsive to texting more than they were to voicemails or to phone calls. That's something that's really changed in the last 10 years in education. I do a lot of phone calling. Those tend to be kind of arranged set appointment times now more than just phone calls, straight phone calls in a crisis. I spent a lot of time in IEP meetings with my parents, obviously. In our district, we've done those on Zoom in the last year. And also, of course, we do them in person. I do parent-teacher conferences, and I do an annual open house for students parents and staff to just kind of get to know the systems of our classroom, and it's a way to help my students kind of feel comfortable in the aesthetic of the classroom again when they come back to school. When introducing myself, some things that are from the reading, ways to help people, to help my introduction have an impact. One is to tell my story and to identify what problem I attempt to solve professionally, or to share my why. And those are things I attempted to do in my introduction in this video, to talk about the value that I have for inclusion and in making students feel welcome, and kind of telling my story in those ways. Our district doesn't have a written or formally communicated communication policy for effective communication. However, these are just kind of the practices that I follow. On our strict confidentiality regarding students, I keep an electronic record of all of my conversations and communications. I do use text messaging with parents. In a conversation, I talked with one of my administrators about whether this was an okay thing to do or not. And I was told that while there's not a set policy, it's not something the district really loves for us to do. But I have found it to be so effective. And so I use the Google Voice app because that records all of my conversations, all of my text conversations with parents. So I have, kind of the written transcript of our conversation within those. You can set it to do that. And I find that parents are just much more responsive to texting than they are to other forms of communication. So if I want to document an incident or to make sure that grades are documented, that kind of thing, I'm going to do that in email. But if there's just kind of a quick checking in to see where a student is, or if I need to have a longer phone call, I can text and ask for a phone call, or ask for paperwork, those kinds of things. I'll do that over texting. This assignment demonstrated a correlation to the objective 5.3 by encouraged healthy and effective forms of communication. It established positive relationships with students and adults, and that leads to an inclusive, equitable, and culturally responsive climate in the school. This assignment was relevant to my learning. When you think about making that change from teacher to administrator, there's so many pieces of introduction and communication. One of the things I've done is job shadowed my mentor administrator, and I see her introduce herself, a million times a day to different people in her conversations with them. So that was really an important piece for me. And that transition involves job interviews. It involves introducing to staff, to colleagues, to parents, students, and trying to make a positive and supportive first impression in developing those key relationships. How did this lesson impact me? Over the last year, one of my own struggles is how to introduce myself having had a doctorate. I want to convey that level of education to people so that they have a trust in my abilities. But also, I don't want to create a boundary between me and other people. I want to create open pathways and to be informal enough that people feel like they have a relationship with me. In particular with my students, my rule to them is they can call me Mr. Lewis or Dr. Lewis. I don't care whether they use that title or not. And midway through the year, my title kind of became Dr. Lou, and that's what my kids call me. It's kind of like their name for me, and I'm very comfortable with that as well. And so that's just a way to build rapport in that introductory language that we use to define who we are. These are the references I used in completing this assignment. Thank you.